Welcome to another episode of the Seven Laws podcast. I'm here again. My name is Michael Poor. I'm a commentator and analyst, geopolitical analyst, and a podcaster. And here with me is Mirek Barta, which is a famous Egyptologist. Hi.
Good morning, everyone. Today is September the 3rd, and we are sitting in Prague shortly after our lunch, and it's almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So and there is no air conditioning in the studio during the talk because it would floor the voice. So this is where we are right now.
Yes. So I have a news. Mirek just published a new book called Civilization Forum. How do you like it, Mirek?
I'm very happy with it because it basically contains some plus minus 30 essays that I produced for DataRun company during the last year and in the first months of this year. And I'm happy to say that the book is going to be translated very soon into English and put online. We still don't know who's going to sell it, but it will be online at any rate. But for you, the good news is that you can find all the Czech versions online on DataRun webpage. And if you use, for instance, DeepL Translator, which is my case, which is Michail's case, then you can simply download the Czech version and translate it, and it's for free. So it's which way you go, it's up to you. But I think it's worthwhile to have a look at the book or at individual essays because it's always 4 or 5 pages, which is 5-7 minutes of reading. This is just enough to dedicate to reading every day.
I think it will be ready in English pretty soon. I hope so. You can find it, as Mirek already said, on the website called DataRun, which means www.datarun.cz or www.miroslavbarta.cz. That's it. So it's not a book about one world region. It's a book about the globe, about the earth, about the civilizations. But now, in our new episode, we are going to Australia. Actually, we've talked about the German elections. And now we think it around. And now I think it's a better way to go to Australia, which is a very distant continent for most of us. And I've never been there. You've been there many times.
You should go.
Many times, I think.
Since you mentioned...
There's nothing, no? Only the Red Rock, or what's the name of this huge rock?
Most people that never ventured to Australia tend to say the same thing. There is nothing to be seen in Down Under. The reality is quite contrary. And why we picked Australia for today's talk is, one, that the German elections are now all over Europe. Political dedicated, I don't know how many articles to the preliminary results and to the preliminary consequences and political reactions. And that's why we are going to talk about the outcome in a week or two. Maybe we will wait for the third Bundesland, which is Thüringen, which is coming up in 2 weeks, I guess.
Yes.
At the end of September.
The elections were in Thüringen and in Saxony.
And then is coming the third country.
Yes, and there is coming the third country. So we will see. Then there will be elections for the whole Germany next year. So this will be the important part of
I think that we should talk about it by the end of September when we will have the election from the third Bundesland. And
Australia.
Why we picked up Australia is for 2 different reasons. Which have a common denominator, Czech input. And then you will figure out that there's quite a lot, actually. We are not going to talk about fancy cities, about industry or agriculture, but about the past and the present, of course, because it's almost impossible to draw a division line between Australian past and contemporary Australia. So the reasons why we talk about Australia today are 2 Czech scientists. Both of them passed away recently. The first one is Yuri George Chalupka, born in 1932, who came to Australia in the early 50s of the last century. He was trained as hydrogeologist, so a person who is looking for sources of water. He ended up in the Northern Territory, came into contact with the original inhabitants of the continent and helped them over decades. He passed away in 2011 and was given a state funeral, by the way, in Darwin, which is a city on the northern in the northern part of the continent. And over the decades, he helped them to survive in the Northern Territory, which is the major part of Australian continent when the Aborigines still stay, and managed to help them with their daily life. They were so grateful to Chalupka that they started to show him one by one sacred sites, because Aborigines art, rock art, is more than 50,000 years old,
yeah.
as far as we know it now. But there is a good chance that it will be even earlier, 55, 60,000 years old. And he was the only non-original inhabitant that had a chance to see the rock art. And when I came there first...
Is he still the only one?
I think now the situation is different, but in those times he was the only one. And when I found a chance to travel the Northern Territory almost a decade ago, I came into contact with one of the rangers, and he kept talking about George Chalupka and his famous book that appeared, of course, in English and is still available on Amazon. It's called Journey in Time. And it's a wonderful book with hundreds of photographs from different sides, explaining the evolution, dating, content, meaning, significance, symbolism of the rock art. And I asked him, who's this George Chalupka? You mentioned him like 15 times within 2 hours. And he said, oh, this is our scientist. And then in the evening, I managed to get to the internet, which was not automatic at the time and not so easy. And I figured out that this George Chalupka is not of Australian origin at all, but that he was born in Czechoslovakia, communist Czechoslovakia, and came to Australia and became one of the best connoisseurs of the rock art in the Northern Territory. I was so amazed.
Yeah, I believe that, because in the Czech language, the pronunciation is Chaloupka. In English, it's Chalupka. It's completely different. It means small cottage, as we would say. For me, the most surprising fact is that he gained the trust of the Aborigines, and he was the only one. How did he gain trust? It looks impossible.
Well, I can't imagine how did he manage, but the outcome is that we know, thanks to him, in the first stage of the rock art science of Northern Australia, he was the person that basically founded the study of the rock art, not only thanks to the fact that he had access to the site, but he was able to communicate with the local people, and they gave him explanations. Because one of the challenges when you stand in front of a rock-carved surface covered with all different motifs, including human figures, lizards, flowers, you name it, to give it a meaning. Because for us, this rock art, if you compare it, for instance, with the famous prehistoric rock art of southern France or Spain, is completely different. It tells different story. It uses different symbols, different figures, and you need an explanation. You need a guide. So I think this was the major contribution of Chalupka.
One interesting thing I saw it in your newsletter, that actually they didn't come from Australia. They came from Timor, or Timor. I don't know
Exactly.
what's the pronunciation of this small island in the Pacific Ocean. How is this possible? Because you've already said it's 60 or 50 or 60,000 years old that they came to Australia. They actually they were able to build a boat like from nothing, from some timber wood or whatever. Is it like that?
Indeed, it seems that they came from Timor. It was a one-way journey because in Australia there was no building route available at the time. As you said, it happened probably some 60,000 years ago, which is probably the earliest dating for the occurrence of people in Australia on the continent. And how it happened at that time, there was still an ice age, so most of the water was concentrated or frozen in ice, both in the north and south of the planet. So the land that was not inundated by the sea or by the ocean was much bigger. You could nowadays, when you compare it with the current level of the sea is more than 80 to 150 meters higher compared to that period. So the distance between Timor and Australia, separated by the body of water, was much shorter. It's been estimated being 80 to 150 kilometers. Given the curvature of the Earth, after 30 kilometers, you are not able to see anything that is on the same level with your eyes, due to the curvature of the Earth. So, but they speculate that the inhabitants of Timor could see the seasonal fires, the smoke coming from burning Australia, which was quite frequent at the time, that we know thanks to environmental analyses that were carried out by the scientists in the last two decades. So they decided to go and explore, and 80 to 150 kilometers was nothing even for those people. Let's just remember Thor Heyerdahl and his pioneering Kon-Tiki journey shortly after World War II. That was, by the way, given that was the only archaeological documentary that was given an American Academy Award, the Oscar. It was, I think, 1948, and it was a big thing. Who knows today, Thor Heyerdahl? But you should go for it and look up the movie on the internet. It is still there, and it's called Kon-Tiki. So Thor Heyerdahl and Kon-Tiki. So this is quite similar. They built simple boats and went on the sea, because at the time the prevailing winds were blowing from the northwest, so they used the force of the wind, and probably in less than 1 week they arrived to Australia. But as I said, it was a one-way ticket because they arrived. The boats were probably destroyed upon landing, which is quite normal, and then they figured out, oh my gosh, I have no chance to go back, and they decided they were forced to decide to stay in Australia.
So, as you said,
maybe one more notice,
yes.
Based on the genetical analysis of the genetic pool of the original inhabitants of Australia, is being estimated that the original population that made it alive to Australia were about 50 to 70 people.
Okay. So as you said, that it means that all the fringes of the indigenous people or the Aborigines are just buried under the tens of meters of the sea. So it's very difficult to find some proof about their civilization. Let's call it civilization.
I would say culture.
You would say culture.
There is no,
so because it's deep, very deep.
That's one of the challenges, because at that time, their material culture was very simple. Semi-permanent settlement, wooden and stone tools, no clothes, basketry, So all this has no chance to survive under the water. And now, since you mention it, it's been estimated that the earliest settlement remains could be in the depths of about 100 meters under the present level of the ocean, and they are probably lost forever because
that's a shame.
to find, imagine to dive into 100 meters, 300 feet, and look for very very
Small pieces
fragile
of the country, yes.
remains of settlement. No chance at all.
Yeah, Australia is also famous for the strange animals. I would say kangaroos, wombats, and so on. Some flightless birds. That's what I have heard and what I've read in the books, that they had not respect for the environment, and they actually killed almost all the mammals in Australia. Is it true?
It is true, but it took them some time, probably 40,000, 50,000 years, because all those species you just named are still attested in rock art.
Unfortunately, we are pretty much faster.
We are much more efficient,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But why I'm saying that it took them several, 40 or maybe 50,000 years is that all these species, or most of them, figure prominently in the rock art that is dated to several millennia ago. So we know that they were not so merciless, that they probably anticipated that they have to somehow go with the nature, that they have to adapt. And it was certainly not a matter of 100 centuries or several decades like was the case in other parts of the world.
I actually saw that there were 3 meters tall kangaroos.
Yes.
How tall is the kangaroo? 2?
Well, it depends, but
3 meters is like Kodiak or something like a big
Bears.
bear, yeah.
And there were no bears in Australia, as far as I read.
Yes. But there were actually rhinoceros-sized wombats.
They were quite
Can you
huge,
imagine
yes.
it?
Yeah, and then we know it because the anthropologists managed to discover their bones. So from the length of individual bones, especially femurs, you can calculate the total size of the body. So this is relatively simple.
What about their burial places, or where they were buried after they've died? It's always a good source of knowledge to find something, to find the bones of the people or the Aborigines. So is there anything like that?
We know some burials. One of the earliest burials comes from the New South Wales, which is not Northern Territory, and it's a woman that was burned. We have, what is quite surprising is that it's probably connected with different local culture types, that some of them were burning their deceased members of the society, and some of them were burying the bodies. And from the New South Wales, there is this burial, and it's maybe 40,000 years old. And we have archaeological evidence that they believed in afterlife, because these people were buried with burial equipment, with some personal accessories. And in the case of the guy that was buried, whose body was buried, he was completely covered with red powder that was imported from a distance of about 200 kilometers. So it was quite an elaborate burial, and the community had to decide, okay, this man meant something really important to us. Maybe he was a local chieftain, and they probably sent somebody to a distance of 200 kilometers, which means 5 days of walking in one direction direction, another 5 days to get back with the load of the powder, and bury him with this high community respect.
Australia actually is very dry land without water. It's very hugely impacted by the climate change. The grades are horrible. We have 90. They have sometimes more than
110,
110.
120. Yes.
That's crazy. Was it always like this?
No, we have to understand that even the climate is changing during the time. Sometimes you have high temperatures and relatively low rainfall, and then there are periods when the temperatures are relatively low with a lot of humidity and rainfall. So but what makes these communities so special is that they manage, and they are still still there. So it's a community or society that lasts for more than 50,000 years as we speak, and maybe even longer. And this makes the community so unique. And one of the things is that because we talk about the original inhabitants of the continent, etc., and nowadays, and it's been since I started to come to Australia or to New Zealand for teaching or lectures, there's always, I get an email from my colleagues or friends from Australia, typically from Macquarie University in Sydney. There always is the final statement that says, and I will now read it aloud, I quote, we acknowledge that Macquarie University stands on the land of the Darug Nation and pay our respects to the Darug people, the Watamatagal clan, and their elders past, present, and future. So it's a very important discourse now in Australia that they understand that they took the land from the original inhabitants, and they are really aware of it. And I'm glad that as far as Australia is concerned, that there is this huge Northern Territory that is a significant portion of the continent that is still open for the original populations.
Back to Jiří Šalupka. The rock art wasn't the only thing he discovered, I think. It was also the musical instruments.
Oh, that was the second.
It's hard to imagine a musical instrument 60,000 years old. What was it like?
I have to slightly correct what you say. It's the second reason why we talk about Australia today. Is another Czechoslovak anthropologist, Jan Jelinek, let's say it in English, who was born in Brno, which is a city in South Moravia, from where most members of our current government come from. And he mounted an expedition shortly after we were taken over by the Russians in 1968. And it was an expedition to, they called this part of the territory Arnhem Land. And his expedition that operated there mainly during the year 1969 was the first expedition that recorded the original music of the original inhabitants. And it's still available on an LP. I think it's even online. It's called Music from the Arnhem Land, and it's a wonderful recording because it's the
so
first
you think
ever
it's
taken.
Listenable? It's listenable, I would say.
Yeah,
it is.
And and it's you can use it for meditations if you practice yoga, for instance.
Okay.
You can use it for your yoga meditations. I like the music very much, I have to say. So Jelinek was another groundbreaking scholar coming from the former Czechoslovakia, who made a major contribution to our understanding of the past history of Australian continent.
Final question.
Yes.
What is the message of the work of both Jiří Šalupka and Jan Jelinek? One is rock art, and the second one is a musical instrument, which means it was a pretty similar culture. For me, it is. Yeah, it was a similar culture like any culture in the whole world, because we've thought. I think almost everyone thinks that Australia is something which wasn't habitable like few hundred years ago. Yeah, they thinks that actually it exists with the British, not with the Aborigines. What is the message?
Well, the message, this is what I learned, not only from them, but mainly from them, is that Australia is a fascinating continent. I wish everybody could go and see at least the Northern Territory. I don't fancy Sydney, for instance. It's a nice city. It's a modern city. It's you can get there everything you wish. But for me, I like to travel in the past. So if you want to see the past of the continent, it's the Northern Territory. It's one of the. It's basically it's not one of, but it's the society that manages to last for more than 50,000 years. There is nothing comparable in the world. So this is one of the lessons we can learn. Another one is that this culture represents quite a fascinating example of local adaptation to the relatively harsh environment of Australia. And because they were so extremely successful in their adaptation strategies, they managed to survive for more than 50,000 years, and they are still there. So nowadays we talk about the necessity to learn how to adapt to changing environment and etc. And here we have the people that are doing it, actually, that have been doing it for 50,000 years. So where we can learn better is from them. That's the best place to learn how to adapt to changing environment, how to understand the nature around you, how to understand individual species of fauna and flora, and use them in a way that they survive, the fact that you have access to them and that you can exploit them. So that's another thing, and maybe the final thing that is quite general is I would use the National Geographic motto, never stop exploring, because whenever you go, if you manage to think out of the box, if you manage to have a different perspective on traditional issues, then there is a 100% probability that you will discover something new. And I think this is probably one of the most important things that fascinates me personally about the study of civilizations, that the story is very far from being closed. We think that since we use Google and iPhones and we will be flying to Mars very soon, that we know everything. But we know still very, very little about our own past, and maybe this is one of the big challenges for this century, that we should become more humble and pay significantly more attention to our own past, because our past determines how we behave in the present and how will be our future. So it's for me, the study of history in a specific way is one of the strategic sciences for this century.
So the final message for me is that we should study Aborigines more.
Or some people should study them more. I think we two are out of the question, but let's hope that there are people that are still paying.
Everyone should study Aborigines more. So thank you. Thank you for your support, and write us your conclusions, I would say. Thank you. Bye.
See you in a week. Bye-bye.